Hi, and welcome back to the Convergently Speaking podcast. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is the topic of relationships, or more accurately, a bit about my own relationship. I'm really excited today to introduce you to my wife, Caitlin, who is here on the other mic.
Hello.
And so looking at the topic of relationships, what we wanted to do is reflect a little bit on our own relationship, because coming up this March, we'll have been married for 10 years. And I think I can speak for the both of us when I say we've been a little bit reflective coming up to this milestone. And so, we wanted to explore and share a few of the things that we've found useful and have given us some perspective along the way. So personality psychology tools have been really helpful for us for our relationship. Some years back now, what was a really big light bulb moment for us around the way we relate and helped us to understand each other and have grace for each other in a way we hadn't, was understanding that within the Myers-Briggs personality system, we learned that the one difference that we have is actually considered the most significant difference that two people can have. In the system, I'm an N, which stands for intuitive, and Caitlin is a sensor. And intuitives tend to like the more abstract, more ethereal, less grounded ideas and things of life. In short, we're less present and embodied. Whereas sensors like the tangible, the provable, the sensory information and data, the more verifiable through one's senses. So as you can imagine, having a person in a marriage who is a sensor when another one is an intuitive is quite a substantial difference. Now, to put this in context, I wouldn't say it created a whole heap of issues or conflicts per se, but there was a substantial gap in our knowledge of how the other one was interacting with and understanding the world. So I found it really interesting to hear Caitlin's lived experience of this and how she's found understanding this difference helpful. So I want to pass it over to you, Caitlin, just to tell us a bit about what learning that you're a sensor and that I'm an intuitive has meant for you.
Yeah, I think that the first point where it really became clear, or the example I sort of always think about, is when we had our first child, which is now about 6.5 years ago. For me, a lot of the day-to-day details and processes and routines that we needed to do with a baby came quite naturally. And that was also because I am the oldest of 5 children, so I'd sort of been through baby stages before. You hadn't, but it came quite naturally to me to notice how the nap routine was going, knowing how the feeding was going, and I would be quite baffled sometimes when I'd reference something that I figured we both knew, like, oh, she's probably tired because it's this time, and you would really have no idea what I'm talking about. And so understanding that you weren't taking in that kind of information, and then if I needed your help with something, I needed to be more overt about it, was quite helpful, and I could accept that about you, or learn to start to accept that about you.
Can I ask, how was it for you learning that you're a sensor, and how did that play out? That played out in a way that you started to understand what I was missing, but did it show you like a skill or a gift, or help you understand yourself better at all?
Yeah, well, I suppose a lot of those things are sort of things that I would take for granted. about, oh, this is just things that everybody notices, or things that this is how I see the world, and would sort of presume that most people saw the world that way. And so I guess having you as an example of the other side of things was helpful to then, I guess, understand my strengths in that area, and realize in those areas I need to take the lead for our family, which has been helpful.
So you had a concrete experience of a person that doesn't live in a very concrete world.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that how?
Yeah.
That's a good way of framing it.
Yeah, being concrete versus not concrete has been a big part of that understanding, actually. Do you want to explain what that means?
Yeah, I suppose we should, because we get what we're talking about, but others might not. Essentially, what I realised was that Caitlin had a gift in being the oldest child. I don't have any siblings, so she had a lived experience there, but also almost like a little step up advantage in terms of managing the practical aspects that come with having little kids, because she exists in a concrete world in a way that I don't. And what I mean by that is her brain has decided that it wants to prioritize taking in and understanding and processing sensory data, and for whatever reason I prioritize more intangible data. So, Caitlin might remember Caitlin will often remember someone's name and probably what they were wearing and their hair colour. Whereas for me, I'll struggle to remember their name, but I will remember the life story that they just happened to open up and tell me, or what was happening in their life and their world and their passions and all that. I'll remember all that. Less concrete, more conceptual, or I don't want to say relational data. I mean, it is relational data, but Caitlin also remembers that too.
Yeah, for you, Dan, it's easier to see the big picture because of your intuition versus sensing. Kind of, you see the big picture and the whole system, and you're more able to see how the positives and negatives and our strengths and weaknesses play off against each other and support the whole family system, I guess. But for me, it's been more of a conscious decision. I've had to work at really noting and appreciating your strengths and what you're bringing to the relationship and to the family. And part of why that's been some work to get there is because what I do in our family is more the practical things, the day-to-day running of the house and doing things with the kids. And so it would be on paper, I could list all the things that I've done in the day and see, I did all this. But it's harder sometimes to see what you're doing behind the scenes. And a lot of that...
Because a lot of what I'm doing is invisible. I think that's what you're getting at, yeah?
Yep, definitely. Yeah, a lot of what your strengths are and what you're doing for our family, which thinking about it is completely invaluable and is a big reason why we all stay afloat and stay together, is you do a lot of the emotional labor. I think we both do that probably well. So we're lucky in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But you definitely do that, and I can appreciate that, especially I can talk to other people, and sometimes that's not the strength of the husband, and that can fall more on the wife or the female in the relationship. So I do definitely appreciate that. You do so much personal development and are very good at that, but even more so, you're good at sharing your learning and bringing me along with you. I think if I was left to my own devices, I would think it's a good idea, but I wouldn't be as proactive to seek out healing and learning and things for my personal development. So I credit a lot of my growth and my learning to you dragging me along with you. And then I've been able to kind of go in different directions that make more sense for me, that aren't things that you are into, but you really keep the momentum going and help me keep that too.
Yeah, I think that's been a big learning for me in this relationship, because I've I've always naturally been a bit of a salesperson, in the sense that whatever I'm into, I get enthusiastic about and want to bring people along with me. I suppose in a sense I'm enthusiastic about growth in general, but I've learnt, and I haven't always got it right, but I've learnt that you need to do it in your way. So I can be excited and enthusiastic and sort of still selling the value of personal development, whilst also realizing not only are you a female and I'm a man, I'm a dad, you're a mum, so there's that difference. There's also pretty fundamental personality differences and even cultural differences, and just your whole lived experience, your whole family of origin, all that is so different that you need to do it in the way that you do it. It's been exciting to see you do that, and it's been gratifying to observe myself being less overly invested in that process. And in the past, I've kind of created these codependent rescuer dynamics where I try and make people do stuff, or always with the best of intentions. But so I don't know where I'm going with that. But.
Yeah, and I think there have been times, probably especially early on in our relationship, that I felt quite stuck. And and we both felt, you were I was sort of a dead weight, and you were doing a lot of growth, and you were getting into new thoughts and ideas. And I think within myself, I thought, this is a path that Dan's taking. It looks good. I should maybe be following along, but it didn't really fit me. It wasn't really what I was into. It was more thoughts and ideas. Not as much practical stuff. Getting back to what we were talking about before, it wasn't as practical, and so I wasn't connecting with it much, and so I sort of just didn't really do anything. But when I've been able to, some of it's crossover of different topics we're both interested in, and then other areas that I have been really something that I've done that's been just me. I actually did a breathwork workshop once that was really profound for me. And that was, I think with your encouragement for sure, but that was something that I found on my own. And I think for me, the more body-based types of experiences really are huge for my growth. So once I was able to realize that we could kind of move forward together, but not exactly on the same path, and following the same things, that's how we both best grew. That's really been huge. Yeah.
I suppose a key thing for us as well has been bringing each other along.
Yeah. I think, again, you're really good at that, at when you're learning something new, or you found a new podcast to listen to, or new people to learn from. You are really good at sharing that, and sharing the excitement, and giving me the dot points of why it's interesting, and kind of teaching me, and I kind of get it through osmosis. And so I've got a lot of learning that way. I'm probably not quite as good at that, but there might be things to know if they areas that I've sort of opened up to you.
Well, I think where that's coming from for me is that with my introverted intuition, part of my Myers-Briggs personality, that's all about future casting and future forecasting. And what I've learnt being married to you is that actually that's a skill and a gift that I have that not everyone has. And I never knew that. I never knew that everyone didn't naturally think through the future implications of what they're doing here and now. And so I've observed so many couples where one person gets on this beautiful self-development journey, and they're dealing with their trauma, and they're looking their demons in the eye and finding real growth and healing. And they turn around one day to realize that they and their partner are in totally different places, and they have to make a decision whether they keep going on their journey and sacrifice their relationship, or whether they kind of, like a rubber band, fling back into their old ways of being. A way I tend to think about this and have shared with people from time to time is that when we get into relationships, there's often an unspoken agreement that, hey, you don't call me on my baggage and I won't call you on yours. And then when one person goes along and starts working on stuff, they disrupt that semi-functional, maybe dysfunctional system, and the other person can easily even become resentful and be like, hey, this is not what I signed up for, and this is not what I agreed to. You're not the person.
You've changed the rules.
You've changed the rules. You've changed the rules. And so I've observed this, and I never wanted that to happen. Now, luckily, I think that I'm just by nature, I can't help myself. I share too much. But now I suppose it's become a value, and I can see things I haven't done right. But this is one thing that I think we have done right.
Yeah, we definitely have. And as I said early on, we weren't as sure how to navigate it. You know, it was maybe we even sort of both thought, I don't know, if you early on you sort of thought, oh, she's not getting into this author and she should be, or I want her to, but we've sort of worked out how it looks for each of us. And I have become more proactive than I was. I think because I've figured out what it looks like for me. I mean, you've always, from the very beginning, given me room to really be myself. And I think even, I don't know if you remember early on, I think when we were maybe just engaged, maybe even before that, you were doing some future casting and saying, you know, I realized you're very young. I was 22 when we got married, and you'll have a lot of change and growth and in those early 20s years. And you sort of said out loud to me, you know, I want to give you space to change and grow, and I'm going to support you. And well, I still remember that. And that was
I remember that too.
Yeah. And you definitely have done that. I've felt, you know, maybe I hold myself back sometimes out of fear of what it looks like if I'm going to change, or what weird things I might get into. But for the most part, you are very supportive in allowing me to change in whatever way that looks like for me. So that's also huge. Yeah.
I'm glad you feel that way, because I don't necessarily, you know, obviously we're more critical of ourselves, and I can feel impulses in myself where I haven't done that. And now having kids, I'm like, got the same thing. I want to let them be who they are, but I don't necessarily feel, well, we want to let them be who they are. But yeah, sorry, you were going to say something.
It's hard. And there have been times where I guess I maybe sort of had to defend my point, or defend why I wanted to go down a path, or explain further, you know, a way that I was thinking or growing, which was uncomfortable. But that was important growth for me, because I'm not good at doing that.
Yeah, and I love that. You know, and that's the thing. Sometimes people think that, or even you would think that I would be critical, or I'm not responding instantly, super enthusiastically or whatever. And it's not that I have any issue. It's that I'm still just holding everything open, essentially waiting for more data, but always open to being convinced. But it's not always obvious. I wanted to switch tacks a little bit, if that's all right, to circle back around to how different maps and models and stuff like that has been helpful to us in a really practical way. Well, helpful to me, because you've spoken a little bit about that. And the one thing that comes to mind for me is the revelation that, or the understanding that, I have almost limitless cognitive energy. And at the end of a night, I can still be musing about all sorts of maybe irrelevant but seems important and deep and philosophical things to me. And your expression of being tired and worn out is really, or what it really means is, I'm brain dead. And then on the flip side, you can be up and about in the evening getting things done, and I can express that I'm tired or worn out. And I'm not referring to my brain, I'm referring to my physical body's energy. And like, yeah, I could sit here till midnight talking about psychological, philosophical ideas, but go and clean the bathroom at 9 at night, yeah, really hard. And just, it's been really helpful to realize that you as a sensor are more embodied, and you for whatever reason, you allocate more of the energy that you get to physical endeavors, whereas I have a huge bias towards allocating energy to my brain. And I'm trying to grow and develop in that area, but at a fundamental level, I will always do that more than I will to my physical body. And that's been hard for me personally to accept and to observe what I am contributing. It's like, I feel like I'm contributing. I feel like I'm doing lots of things. And at the same token, I'm very aware of the things I'm not doing, because when you have little kids, there's just all these physical, practical tasks that need doing. So understanding where that's coming from has given me grace for myself, and understanding that you have specific gifts, and understanding what things I have that you don't have.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today, actually. And I think part of that, maybe more on my end, is also, once we sort of understand that, the difference in where we're allocating our energy, is trusting the other person too. That if if it comes to the end of the night, I'm not up for a big conversation, trusting me that I'm not just shutting you out or not prioritizing you or something like that, but I actually cannot engage my brain.
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, it has been. And I think, yes, like you say, having kids has, with each one adds to the physical amount of things that need to be done. But with talking about kids now, with the future forecasting, if your personality is focused more on the future and being able to see how things are going to play out, I'm the opposite, where I tend to live in the past and also just kind of go with what worked in the past and keep going with what worked in the past when it's not working in the present. And so you are very good at kind of reminding me things with the kids, like, oh, this isn't really working anymore, or just kind of sticking a spanner in the works for me of helping me think a different way.
Yeah.
And realize, and because I'm in the day-to-day of it, you're slightly more outside view, that you're like, oh, maybe, this isn't working anymore, let's try this. I'm good at bringing innovation and new ideas, and that's a luxury you get when you're not actually having to quote unquote maintain the status quo, which you're able to do. And if you didn't do that, I'd have nothing to innovate, and it would just be a mess. Yeah. Yeah.
So
it works well.
I think what we've really come to realize is that we need to trust that the other one is doing the best. And I think you're the one to first name that, and I like that framing of it. I need to trust that you're doing your best. You need to trust that I'm doing my best. Mm-hmm. And then I can get self-critical again and think, am I really doing my best at every moment of every day? And it's like, well, working to that close to your margin's silly anyway, Like, I don't want you to be doing your best at every moment of every day in terms of like sheer productivity. Your best includes resting. And like you said today, you're just going to read at the cafe instead of get some work done. And I was happy about that. It's like, well, yeah, that's what she needs to do, and that's really important. And
I did end up doing the work instead, but I'd given myself the permission.
Yeah.
Given myself the permission to rest.
And so I think that comes to the other point that I know we wanted to discuss, which is externalizing the blame, blaming the system.
Yeah. And
you pointed out the other day that I'm saying quite often at the moment, it is what it is. It is what it is. And I'm saying that because whilst I think we have a lot of control, there's also a lot of control we don't have. There's all sorts of things that come from left field that's not my fault, that's not your fault, that if I tried hard enough, I could make your fault. But apart from the fact that it's not true, it's not serving anything anyway. And I think we've talked quite regularly about trying to blame the system, trying to blame the circumstances, and owning those feelings and emotions, sitting with those things, but not giving in to blaming one another, which is such a quick,
so easy to do,
and such a quick way to kill a relationship. Like it's foolish, it's this idea of you can win the argument but lose the war. If I find a smart, sophisticated way to blame you, I might win, but I'm cutting off my own foot in the process.
And it just breeds resentment, which takes so much more energy, rather than, I think, along with that is, well, again, accepting each other, accepting the situation, and I guess working with it, and not giving in to resentment, because that can, I don't know, if everything feels chaotic, it can, your brain sort of wants to make sense of it, and then that's your partner's an easy target, and you can go, well, this didn't get done, I know why I didn't do it, so obviously they should have done it because they must have had time or energy, or I can't see why they couldn't do it.
Yeah. We cut ourselves a break because we're intimately involved in all the complexities and nuances of what we've been putting up with and all the places that we've been expending our energy. And then it's really easy to not consider all those nuances with the other person. I think the cool thing that I've noticed about not taking that easy route is when you blame the other party, it's almost like a dead end. It's like, well, if the other person just did ... it would all be good, and then we can go off on our self-righteous way. But when we refuse to do that, it actually triggers an opportunity for creative solutions. So if it's not my fault and it's not your fault, then we just need some either extra help, whether that be from a person, whether that be from something that we can actually create through money. For example, we're both tired, so we're going to buy dinner out, or we're going to pay for some kind of a service.
Or just lowering our expectations of what we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which sometimes that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, that's true. So is there anything else you wanted to bring up or comment about? I mean, we can have you on again and we can talk about this sort of stuff again.
No, I think we covered a lot and covered probably the high points of what our main trajectory has been and what our learning has been.
That's what I was going to say actually earlier. It's a metaphor that came to me. It's almost like you want to be on the same trajectory, but you're not necessarily going to get there through the same route. We might be going in the same direction, but I might be on a gravel road at one point while you're cruising on some brand new bitumen, and then later on, the paths might change, but we're still heading in the same direction. At least that's how I'm envisaging it.
And it's harder if we're both going through something really hard at the same time too, so
that never happens.
But, of course that does sometimes, but if we can sort of trade off doing the really hard learning or growing, that kind of upsets the apple cart. If we were both doing that at the same time, that would be even harder.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does happen.
I'd say moderate amount of times. Well, yeah, that's, from my perspective, that's all I really had in mind for this podcast. And I think we've covered the few points that we'd hope to cover.
Yeah, and they're, after 10 years, they're sort of easy dot points to look back on.
Yeah.
Some of those were definitely hard won and have been, in amongst other hard life circumstances that have really pushed us to grow. But yeah, I'm always so grateful looking back on, the whole picture and all of the things that challenging things have brought with them. And looking at where we are now is quite amazing. Yeah.
It is. I agree. Thank you.
No worries.
So yeah, that was my first interview for the Convergently Speaking podcast, and I'm really happy that I could have you join as the very first one. And Caitlin's been doing the editing, which I keep meaning to mention, and I don't think I have. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
That's you dealing with the practical, tangible details that would overwhelm me. You've been doing a really good job. So that's been so helpful and such a gift.
Thanks. No problem.
And thanks for tuning in today. You've been listening to the Convergently Speaking podcast.